Alrighty, good morning, good afternoon, good day. Welcome to the first ever episode of Greater Life Stories. And this is an opportunity for all those who are members of the Greater Life community and those who may be on the road to joining us, to hear from folk who are in some way, shape or form living a greater life, and as such hold key wisdom for those of us who want to, beyond the age of 50, live a greater life. So my name is George Hardwick, as you can see up there on the little screen in the top. Well, that side, there we go. And I am joined today by author, badass life coach, soul spark. Ellen, I'll let you fill out those other pieces that we might include. But this is exciting for me because when my business partner Mike said that he'd been in conversation with Elen Sentier, I was like, hang on a sec, like the Elen Sentier. Like that was my response, Ellen, was the Elen Sentier, because as someone who has, trained in the shamanic arts and who just feels deeply that my soul is needs to be plugged into these lands, right? That when I came across your books, they held a wisdom for me that I had been seeking. So thank you for writing the books that you've written. And thank you for joining us. And so to kick off our first ever episode of Greater Life Stories, Ellen, please let the folks know how you would describe your work and what you seek to do in the world.
Wow. Well, thanks, George. I'm absolutely thrilled to be on the very first episode. When George invited me, I didn't know this, guys. So this is like, oh wow, I'm the first one on here. So what you have in front of you is this crazy cat lady, this wild woman who lives in the wild hills of Shropshire, writes crazy novels, very nice novels actually, and lots of stuff about how I grew up. And for my own business, I help people who are stuck. And I like helping them, mostly because they come along and they say, I don't even know why I'm stuck. I don't know what I'm stuck about. I just know I'm stuck. And so it's like a journey. Everyone is like a journey into the enchanted forest. It's sort of like, magical mystery tour. Where are we going? And we go into this person, and they then find themselves. And of course, I get the pleasure of watching and helping and seeing them become themselves. And to me, there's nothing more thrilling than seeing a person discover themselves, recognize themselves. It's like the Eastern aha moment. And as you see the eyes light up and they're lovely. So I, for want of a better word, call myself a coach, but I'm an enabler, hopefully an inspirer. And if you've got a problem, well, come along and we'll chat and we'll see if we can work it out. And that's what I do.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I think, you kind of use the phrase, like, for want of a better word, you use the word coach, right? And my hope is, and I had a conversation with another kind of, for want of a better word, coach, but she was using the word kind of facilitator as well. And she also used this phrase that I'd love to test on you because I feel like it might resonate. She said she kind of regarded herself as almost like a soul GP, where she had an apothecary of tools behind her, and that not necessarily knowing what potions or techniques or processes might be needed, but that within her skill set, she would have something that, like you say, could help unlock, or in your case, help get unstuck and help someone come back to the real self, right? So before we kind of launch into a little bit of if this is Greater Life Stories, I'd love to hear some of the stories of almost like how you came to the point where you can help people get unstuck. I guess I'm curious because one of the things that we found in the journey of trying to build greater life is that past 50, almost like the opportunities to get stuck seem to increase, insofar as there are a number of crossroads that one might come to where one could get stuck, like the crossroad of empty nest syndrome, the crossroad of bereavement, the crossroad of being made redundant, or some kind of retirement that doesn't quite work out. So I'm curious to know in your work so far, have there been any commonalities in like almost like the symptoms of stuck, if you like?
Yes. Excuse me, people. I haven't got any horrible diseases. I've just got a frog in my throat. It all comes to being a witch, they
Yeah.
get around.
Yeah.
Yes. I wouldn't say I'd use any of those. The most common one I find with people is boredom.
Say a bit more.
Well, you grew up, you went to school, you maybe went to university or apprenticeship, or anyway, you started being a window cleaner and it was a great guy, and you did the job, and then maybe you went into partnership, personal partnership, maybe business partnership, maybe you had kids, and then you get to a stage where that's gone, and you don't want to be a window cleaner anymore, and you don't. The kids have gone, and you actually, it's quite nice because you've got me time again. I'm dying, not really, honestly. And so, what do I do now? And then you look around you, and there are too many people nowadays who are saying, "Oh, well," I mean, I had it said to me last Thursday. Went to this women's business meeting, great women, fantastic, sassy lot. And the woman next to me discovered how antique I am, well past vintage. And she said, "Oh, are you working to winding down now?" I sort of looked at her like, "What? I've just started. I've just started my 5th career." And she said, "Oh," I said, "No, the only time I'll be winding down is, when they either put me on the pyre or bung me in the ground. And like, when I will wear purple, I'll go in kicking and screaming with a glass of champagne." Now, I'm not bored, as you can probably tell, because I've let myself say, "No, I'm not winding down. I'm winding up."
Yeah.
But so many people and their families, I've seen this with over 50s clients, and their families say, "Oh, Mum, don't you want to retire yet?" And the mum's sort of like, "Oh, have I got to retire because the daughter's going to be embarrassed if I don't?" Or somebody looks and says, "Oh, you're too old to do that." You go, "Pardon? Body's still doing it. Why not?" So there's so many external pressures that we have to conform to. We think we have to conform to.
Yeah.
So we sit in there and we think, "I'm back in a box again." You get all the shoulder stuff. And so people are bored. They want to do something. They've probably got to a stage where they've done lots of reading and lots of watching interesting television programs and films and things. And they get excited about archaeology or herbalism, or they're really into quantum physics or energy medicine or something. And somebody, possibly several somebodies, say, "Oh, you can't do it. I mean, another lifetime, love."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's this, you're constrained, and you have to break out of that. And it's very hard to break out of that on your own.
Yeah.
I was brought up by anarchist parents. I'm completely off the wall and totally out of the box. And so it's reasonably easy for me. If somebody else wants to break out of the box, say, "Come on, let's do it this way." And I will help them. But unfortunately, as yet, we don't seem to grow on trees, and people do need someone to help them.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, George, but you probably heard the word therapist. Now, do you know what the word comes from?
I have come across it, but I can't draw it off the top of my head, so go for
It
it.
comes from Greek, and it's the Greek word theraps. And a reasonably easy translation of it is a theraps is someone who walks alongside you.
Yeah.
Not walks behind you and pushes, not
Yeah.
walks in front of you and says, "This way, chaps."
Yes.
Walks alongside.
Yeah.
And that actually does fit me.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I really hear that there's this kind of, if I've read between the lines of what you're saying, that there are these social narratives like you went to school, you maybe went to uni or whatever. You tick the boxes that you were meant to tick according to the social narratives, and then
Yeah.
you get to a certain point, and you're like, well, hang on a sec, but like, where's me in all of this, right?
Yeah.
And
Very much.
so yeah, and at that point, then potentially maybe some other social narratives are starting to come in, like, shouldn't you be retiring and things,
Yeah.
and the sense I get is that as you walk beside these folks that you help to get unstuck, that you are also a living example of being unstuck, and that therefore, they're not walking in your footsteps. But if they, if they stumble, then someone who is walking beside them can just help them to catch their feet again,
Yeah.
and to keep walking, or even to start walking. So I really like that.
Yeah. Yes, that's true, and it does work. But you need to, when you were walking alongside, I just need to pick this one up, is you don't always help them to catch their feet again. Sometimes you push them in the hole.
Mm.
Go on, swim.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Huh.
Yeah. Jump
I
off that
guess
cliff. You can fly. Honest, you can.
I guess
And
the
it's sort
mastery is
of,
knowing
yeah.
which hole, and and when to push and when to give them a hand out and things.
Absolutely.
That's the mastery.
Yes. That is the mastery.
Yeah.
And you say you have shaman tendencies as well. I know you do. So do I. And that person always walks alongside.
Yeah.
You never push and you never pull.
Yeah, and I think it's a really, like, later we're going to get into some of the kind of principles or perspectives that, like, feel really important, that I can hear that you've gleaned, and one of those seems to be, in a world where there's loads of kind of quote unquote coaches and things out there, right? Which is great, because it means that people are, there's help available.
Yeah.
However, one of the dynamics that can get set up, and that I hold my hands up and say that I fell into at times as well, because you want to help, can be to set yourself up as savior rather than as kind of like someone who walks beside, right?
Oh,
And
you nailed it, George.
yeah, I'll put you on my back and I'll take you up there, but actually, like, they never learn to climb the hill, or they never learn to swim, right? Rather than saying, hey, you're doing well, you've got more in your tank, or here's how to swim, so I think that's it's a really important piece that you've struck on early on, is but if you're watching this and something that Ellen has been saying is resonating, like you're feeling a bit stuck, and you are seeking some support, well, obviously speak to Ellen. However, if not, because there may be something about Ellen that you don't resonate with, and that's okay, right?
Absolutely.
But seek out someone who will walk beside and not try and save you. You don't need saving. You have what you need. What you may need is someone who can walk beside you and potentially push you in a pond when you need to be pushed in a pond. All right. Awesome. So I'd love to get into a bit of, like, so if this is the work that you're doing now, right? I'd love to kind of hear, just a few, if you can kind of bring them to mind, like some stories that perhaps began to shape the Ellen that I am having a conversation with now, who can do this amazing work. So was there anything in kind of like your early childhood that you feel was like this experience, or this person, or this lesson that I learned, that helped to start to build some of these foundations that you're now standing upon?
Well, yes. Maybe we should mention the fact that I was brought up by a family who'd been practicing the old witchy ways of Britain for generations and generations and generations, going back thousands of years. And we can trace ourselves back. And when I'm not the only one, there are a lot of us about, but you won't notice us because we all look like everybody else. Partly, we can go into that another time, but because we all learned to keep our heads down, because it wasn't a good thing to say.
Yeah.
So I didn't exactly have what most people would call as a normal upbringing. And one that stands out today for me is my Uncle Jack. I was born on Dartmoor and later grew up a lot on Exmoor. So it's sort of southwest wild moorland stuff. And Uncle Jack was what is known as a woodsman. That's not a gamekeeper. It's a person who looks after trees, who looks after woodlands. And Pete Walburn has written this book, The Hidden Life of Trees. He was sort of like him.
Okay.
And Uncle Jack sort of knew all about trees because the trees had taught him, not a book.
Yeah.
And Uncle Jack, one of his most stunning sort of things, which he didn't do for party tricks, which he didn't do at all. But you go out in the field and he'd stand there and he'd put his arm right up high, and his fist like that, and just stand there for a moment. And within a moment or 2 moments, a wild hawk would be down on his fist. Now, most people don't normally grow up with that. At least I only know a couple more who have. That was because Uncle Jack could talk to the hawk. He could talk spiritually, mentally, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And the hawk would talk back. He did the same with trees, but trees don't tend to normally sort of come and sit on your hand.
Yeah.
A bit hard if they did. But I grew up with that. So I grew up with, this hawk is just as important as you, Ellen. You know, this tree is just as important as you. No, don't go breaking that branch off. You're hurting the tree. Well, the plant doesn't want to go there. Can't you feel that? You know, go and put that rose tree over there, Ellen, when you're helping Dad. Uncle Percy was another one. He, Percy, but Uncle Percy to us. And he was a gardener, but he was a beekeeper. And in those days, beekeepers still do, if there's a swarm, you can go out and take it. Now, many beekeepers will go and put on all their kit and go out and take the bees. Uncle Jack went to the garage, got a ladder, saw there was a swarm clustered up in the tree, climbed up the tree, took him in his arms, came carefully down the ladder and walked up the road to his beehive with his hat on and his ordinary shirt and trousers and an armful of bees and some buzzing around. And he got stung very occasionally, but very, very occasionally. He talked to the bees. The bees talked to him.
Yeah.
So that's what brought me to this work, because I've never done anything else in a way. I went on and I was a computer boffin for the Ministry of Defence, scratch his head. But even there, I was running into people. One of the funniest was he was a wing commander who was in charge of various policy bits in London. And he also ran a very famous alchemy school in Bath.
Okay.
But we went out to the pub and talked about it. But we just went, all right, no, okay, we're going to this meeting now, so we're just going to talk about jet engines or some kind of rubbish. And then you'd find, I don't know, there was a couple of people in the Royal Marines, and they were like this. I had dealings with the special services, and some of them were like this. So I've always been accidentally, on purpose, I suppose, falling in with people like that. And when you think like this, okay, this was quite fun. We built, me and a couple of colleagues, a girl and a bloke, built the original computer for defence sales, which sorted out the whole relational databases and inter-office communications and all this kind of stuff, and then also took it out so they could deal with Rolls-Royce or whoever as well. And there was this bloody great party when the whole thing sort of went live. You know, these things are. So everybody was dressed up, but it was an age where you could do silly things, so we did silly things as well. But just before this party was about to set off, Cheryl, my female colleague, she fell up the stairs into our office and she broke her ankle. And she was 2 stairs down going, help, help. And so I went out there and, what the hell have you done? Phoned for the ambulance, went back to her, and I also give healing. So I gave her healing, and the ambulance came and took her away, and her leg was all plastered up because one did that then in those days. And this was about 3 or 4 days before the party. So there was Cheryl on a crutch with her leg plastered up. And so our male friend, Ian, got a nice little blow-up parrot and pinned it on her shoulder. And so she was going around going, saying, hello. pieces of 8. And it was that kind of a scene. But she accepted the healing. Everybody else accepted that I'd done it. There were some women who were really scared about using monitors in those days. It was, it's not going to stop me having children, is it? It's not going to do something awful to me, is it? And we ended up giving them, getting a basket of crystals and taking them into them. This is in top level Ministry of Defence office in London, and saying, you just pick two of those, dear, and put them around your computer. But the funniest one of that was after the party, which was on Friday, we all came in on the Monday, and the big machines that we have, the mainframes, were down in the old War Office, and we were up in Soho Square. So dring, 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 dring. Yeah, what? Computers down. What? 7 o'clock in the morning. This thing's supposed to be 24/7. So, okay, we'll come down and fix it. So Ian and I went down and fixed it. And then the following Monday morning, dring, 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 dring. That machine's down again. What? And so Ian and I, he was into all this as well. He said, I'll fix this bloody thing. Now, you probably know the inside of a laptop goes because it's got a crystal in it. This is what makes it go. Nowadays, it's a man-made crystal, but with the old crystal radios, it was a piece of quartz.
Yeah.
So I said, sod it. So there was a crystal shop on the way down between us and the main building. So we bought some crystals, and we got a couple of chairs, because these were the days when a mainframe computer was the size of a large freezer.
Yeah.
And climbed on the chairs, and we did a crystal array on the top of these two mainframes. Then it went wrong again. And we threatened the ops staff that if they touched that, we would hang, draw, and quarter them slowly. That it wouldn't. So I've always been in it in all sorts of ways.
Yeah. I really hear that.
Out of it.
I really hear that notion of kind of walking two worlds, right? That
yes.
That you had this upbringing, with connecting into such a lineage, Uncle Jack and Uncle Percy, and yet here you were, like, seemingly in the as far from that lineage and that world as possible, the MOD and computers, and yet here were that world was intersecting and influencing, right? So it's fascinating. That is really, really fascinating. And so you've always had this almost like the threads of your lineage have been weaving your life, right?
Yes.
I guess I'm also curious to know, were there ways in which the MOD and computers world, and what may have come after that for you in terms of your kind of professional life, right? Mm-hmm. Were there ways where that influence went the other way, that you were, I guess the example that comes to mind is Barbara Brennan, who, was, a healer who could, see the human aura, but also was a NASA trained physicist who could then bring that rigor of how to test and work with protocols and things. So I guess I'm curious to know if the influence went the other way as well.
Well, it does. I'm also married to an ex-particle physicist.
Okay.
I've had, quantum entanglement with the cornflakes for 50 years.
Right.
So yes, it does. But most people have to relearn this. I think it's there in everybody, but they have to relearn all this connection and this stuff that we all have when they're like well conscious, at least 20, if not 30, 40, 50 or whatever. But I didn't, which had its own drawbacks. But meeting Paul also has quite a magical lineage behind him. But he's a scientist and a mathematician, and they have rigors, but they are so similar to the true old ways.
Yes.
Ask the right question and you get an answer. You get the answer you want. Science will always answer precisely the question you asked. Yes. So does magic. Get me out of here to, your guides and allies
Yeah.
might mean sort of picking you up and heaving you across a field.
Yes.
That wasn't quite what you meant. So, when you work magically and when you start really working magically, you have to learn to ask questions and you have to learn to listen. You have to learn to fail, and you have to learn that a failure is possibly even more important than a success. You learn more from it. And those are so like science, they're so like computer programming or building a network or anything like that. So, yes, there's a lot of crossover there, which I still use.
That's fascinating. So say a bit more about this piece. Like, I guess two things. Maybe we need a bit more context. So when you speak about, working magically,
Yes.
maybe worth sharing a bit about what you mean by that, because for someone as steeped in your lineage as you are,
Is
that's like walking. It's
yes,
as
correct.
effortless as. Yet,
Yeah.
my guess is,
To
although it's
most people,
becoming,
it isn't.
yes, becoming more mainstream now,
Mm.
but there perhaps is still a little bit of context that might be useful.
Well, this is a way that I often work with, or clients often want me to work with them. Let's put it that way around. Um, we have four basic functions, which come through Jung in the most obvious, acceptable way.
Yeah.
The guts, the instincts, the feelings, the heart, if you like, the thinking, the mind, and the intuition. Now, everybody is taught that you work with the mind.
Yeah.
We think everything. We're supposed to think it out for yourself, work it out for yourself. What do you think about this? How do you think that works? And if you start talking about your feelings, they sort of say, oh, well, that's sweet, darling, but, can we just get down to business?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you start talking about your instinct that you feel you should do something, you shouldn't do something, or you've got to go and do that, but you don't know why. They say, oh, for goodness sake. Instinct is an animal thing,
Yes.
We'll get into that later if you like. And then if you talk about your intuitions, oh God, she's gone all woo-woo again.
Yeah.
So we have these four functions gifted to us through evolution, God, or whatever you want to call it. And which one? And we only use 1/3? No, 1/4?
Yeah.
What I teach people and what the magical ways are is you learn how to listen to and work with your guts and your instincts. How to know, I don't know why I shouldn't do that, but I know I shouldn't, or I know I've got to do that and I don't know why, but I'm going to do it anyway. You learn that feelings are fine. They absolutely are vital and you can't live without them. And you're supposed to care and be empathic, and you're supposed to be angry and upset. And you can even have tantrums if you want to. And thinking's really useful. I mean, I personally can't drive a car without thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really, I wouldn't like to try. And my accounts will be rubbish.
Yeah.
And my intuition knows, like 3 years ago when we got moved up here, that my business had to change. And I didn't know why or how. Well, I knew a little bit of why, but I didn't know how. So it's like, next step, please. Next step, please. Now, anybody and everybody can do this. So it's just something that we've lost since we became very materialistic and thinky based and all that kind of stuff. And so those things are just superstition, dear. I bring that back. I bring that back with business leaders. I brought it back with stockbrokers. I haven't brought it back with a politician yet. I'm not sure I want to. But accountants, artists, writers, everybody, anybody can do it. And when they do it, they find their business works better.
Yes. Yeah.
And they also find that their business doesn't work so selfishly. And that's a big thing for me. So,
Lots to pull on there.
So magic is what we do automatically, but we call it something else and we disregard the bits that we can't understand.
Yes, or that we've been like trained to not give attention to, right?
Yeah.
As you were sharing the what was coming was Uncle Jack saying that, that tree is as important as you are. Like that.
Yeah.
So far, we have the mind is important, yeah, for sure. However, these other three functions are equally important, and
Yes. Yeah.
the additional question that comes then, because I'm sure that one of the gifts, if you like, of those who have, are past 50, is that perhaps they've had an opportunity to get some feedback on their instinct, right?
Yes.
I think you mentioned it when we first had a call of like, oh, I went in that room last time when my instinct was saying not to, and I've learned my lesson, right?
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious if you've got any ways of helping the listeners or viewers to delineate between like instinct and intuition, because they're the ones where I guess people could think they're synonymous, and I'm sure they're not. So I'm curious if you've got any kind of refinement on that.
They're not. They are very closely aligned. And certainly at first, when you're first starting out, it doesn't really matter if you are not sure which is which.
Yeah, the guidance is still there, right?
Yeah. Well, yes. Okay. Yes. Instincts, you will very often literally feel it in your guts. That's
Okay.
why we
Right.
say it.
Got you.
My guts are saying, and we've all had this sort of feeling around the solar plexus and in the stomach, and you just feel it cramp up, or you just feel, and it opens up now. Oh, I've got to go there, and it is very unwordy. It's feeling. It might be a picture, but it's mostly a sensory feeling, and like a clutch of your heart when you're afraid, or your breath. Okay, I'm going to say it. And this is something I was taught. I'm a psychotherapist as well. We were taught the psychotherapy. Get to a stage with your client where you can say, "Is your anal sphincter tight?"
Mm.
And I'm not kidding you.
Yeah.
When you get scared, you do clutch.
You pucker up. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, let that go. And then you can actually help people and teach them let it go, and then understand what it is. So guts and instinct is very physical.
Okay.
And intuition is more like the Eastern aha moment. You're saying, I've got to do that.
Right.
In a different way.
Got you. Yeah.
It happened with me with the when I really got into the psychotherapy. There's this bloke who I knew vaguely, I'd heard of, that's why I went to hear him speak. And so hearing him speak in this big lecture hall. And he could have been reciting the telephone directory for the amount I can remember of what he said.
Yeah.
But I just sort of shot out of my seat at the end of it and rushed up and said, I've got to do this. How do I join?
Yes.
And that wasn't guts. That was like, I've got to have it. I suppose the nearest most people would have is when you really do see your life partner. That's close to intuition. And it's not just a nice person. It's not somebody you fancy. It's just, all that sort of stuff. You suddenly go, oh my God. That's him or her or whatever.
Yeah.
Or if you have an animal, particularly if you do rescue animals, which quite a few of us probably do, and you go to the rescue place, and one puppy comes to you, and you just go, "That's my dog."
Yeah, as you say that, like I recognise actually, like absolutely had that with my current Labrador Oscar, and we went to visit him from the place we were rescuing from in Wales, and like I guess the question is this puppy going to be a fit? Can I trust this? And I just saw him, and it was an instant yes. There was almost like an instant. I'm cautious of the word download, but it's like almost like an instant impression of his character.
Yeah.
And that's proven to be the case, even now, like, a year into having him almost, that instant snapshot that I received of this is a being I can trust. Here's kind of what his character is absolutely spot on. So, nice.
You used the word download there.
Yeah.
That's perfect. From, the computer bopping rubbish that I have. It is like a packet download.
Yes.
As you would with your computer, and it sends you a compressed file. It is almost like that happens inside you. Oh, what was that?
Yeah.
And then you unpack it, and you find out all the bits of it, after you and Oscar have really got it going together.
Yeah. Nice. So that feels, yeah, thank you for that. And I think that context is really valuable, and we've unpicked a few bits there as well. But I was keen to get that context to let you share a bit more around this notion of when you're perhaps working magically and with these 4 functions that we have. Say a bit more about failure. Because this feels something that's been so ingrained out of us in this kind of mind-dominated world where, it's, you're literally graded on getting the right answer, right?
Yeah.
So I guess, I'm really curious to know a bit more about what you mean when you say you've got to be okay and allow failure and things in this kind of magical working.
I'm going to use one. I've just run retreats 3 or 4 times a year. I've just finished one this last weekend. And one of the girls there on the retreat, the ones I do at the moment are just, unfortunately, I'm sorry, they're just for women. So
Yeah.
sorry, George, we'll work on it later. But she really got something around the back of her neck.
Right.
And I'm just working how to say this because obviously it's private, but the overall concept isn't.
Yeah.
She got this idea that we were some of us were holding space for the others while the others did something.
Yeah.
And the others, I was holding space, but also sort of saying, and now think about this, or now what are you feeling about that? And just slightly leading.
Yeah.
And she was one of the ones who was supposed to be holding space. So we came out of it and we got what the people who were doing it, what had happened for them.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, what happened for us who were holding the space? And so, this girl said, I was getting a load of threads between me and these people, and I was feeling what they were feeling and sensing it, but I was also feeling that I was helping hold the space for them, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, this one girl sort of said, well, I'm sorry, I didn't do that. I went off on the journey with them. So it was like, oh. And she got it. She's not thick. She's nice. And she said, well, that wasn't what I was supposed to be doing, but I really wanted to do it. I said, yeah, so what's the learning out of that then for you? Well, I should have asked. Yes, that's a good start. Well, if I asked you and I sort of said, well, do you mind if I really do that? And you might have said yes. I said, no, I wouldn't have said no. And so like, could I have negotiated? Nope. And we went into it, and she says she realized that she'd actually been thinking about me and not about the people she was supposed to be helping. She did what she wanted to do and sod the rest of you.
Yeah.
It wasn't, it's not as bad as that.
Yeah,
but it's sort of like she wasn't doing what she said she would do at the beginning of the exercise because she really wanted to do something else. Now, that was a failure. But where we went from there was like, okay, hands up anybody who hasn't done that. No hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
And right now, thank you, Jane, for doing it, because you've actually shown us much better than talking about it what would happen, what happens, how it is for you, how it is for everybody else, how everybody else feels slightly let down. And it's don't blame yourself, because we know that now right down in our bones. Whereas if we just read it in a book or heard Ellen talking about it, it'd just be and so everybody in the room said a thank you to her for showing us. And she was absolutely overwhelmed, because obviously once she realized what she'd done, she was mortified. And then we sort of said, no, you needed to do that for us because we all learned from you. So that was a failure, but it wasn't, was it?
Yeah, because I guess the intention was to take the learning and I guess also salute her for not hiding. right? Like
Absolutely. I mean, that was like 110 out of 10, girl.
Yeah. In a failure situation, you could hide from the pain of failure, or you can lean into it and learn from it. So
yeah, and realize that you were also helping other people learn, not just you.
Yeah.
That you're not doing something just for you. And very often when you fail, you're not. In science, it's the same, as I think you know. They spent a long time looking for the Higgs boson. And every time they didn't find it, they knew not to do that again.
Yeah. So, based on that, I guess one of the things I've heard you say is that you happily embody the crone, right? You're happy that this is the phase that you're in. And for those who don't know what we're talking about here, like the kind of the triple goddess of mother, maid, and crone, right?
Postmenopausal, elderly, body falling to pieces, skin a wreck, and you get fat.
Yeah,
it's all that shit.
Yeah, and yet and here's the thing, and you're still choosing to wind up, right? So I guess what I'm curious to kind of know is that in this vein of you've had a number of opportunities in your life now to try this and it not work, and to learn and to go again. So are there any kind of principles or perspectives that really serve you, that you must kind of almost like if we talk in your computer boffin language, like, are there any kind of operating codes that you use for your life to make it work at the moment, that you feel like this is something that over time, I've tried this, it hasn't worked, this hasn't worked, and over those iterations, this way of operating has developed for me? Have you got any kind of like that you can think of?
Not really like that, but close enough.
Okay.
The one question that I will ask myself before I do anything, or hopefully before I do anything, but usually it's after, is like, does that make your heart sing? If it doesn't, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Because it's probably wrong, and you are making a mess of it. And we had another occasion of that on the retreat, where people were crafting something, and this one girl, she was fighting it the whole time, and we eventually got to the stage where they're making drums, and it was all going wrong every time. Everything was going wrong, and eventually she actually came out with, well, all I wanted of the drum actually was the hoop. I didn't want to make a drum. I want the hoop. And she'd had lovely visions and insights and stuff from the hoop. I want the hoop, and I want to decorate it. But she'd been told she was making a drum.
Right. Yes.
And she said, I want to make a drum.
Yeah.
And no, you don't. You want the hoop.
Yeah.
So that's what she ended up with. So that was what made her heart sing, not the drum making. And for me, it's like what I'm doing now, the way I'm working now is quite different from how I worked up to last year, say.
Yeah.
And I can't work as I used to anymore. It's a bit of a shock when you find that. But what I am doing now, and every time I do something that makes my heart sing, it works.
Yeah.
Every time I think, oh, well, I ought to do that,
there's a forcing current. Yeah.
So you have to learn that way, which, this is your way. Will you stop trying to go that way?
Yeah. And so, that is fascinating, because I hear that there's quite a few ways that what we've discussed so far weave together in what you've just shared, right? That there's, on some level, the piece around failure is key here. That in the example you gave of making the drum, well, no, like, I just want the hoop. So I have to be okay to fail at making a drum in order to get what my heart's desire is, right? And I guess I'm also curious to get your take on how those four functions of, intelligence, intuition, instinct, and the other one that you will let me know, how they perhaps align.
You just forgot that you forgot the big one for you. George, look at me. George.
Yeah. What?
You didn't do feelings.
Right. Okay, there we go. Right. I think I was trying to make them all begin with I. I think that was my error because I'm a wordsmith. That's my, I was trying to see, and I haven't got one yet.
Yeah,
But
try and do it with your guts instead of your head.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I guess I'm potentially, had she tuned in across those four functions sooner.
She did, but we're going back to something we talked about earlier about,
Mm,
you're 50, so there's a load of social constraints
right.
and sugar
Yes.
less and things that come out at you. So I said I'd make a drum. Um, so I'd be failing if I didn't do what I said I'd do.
Yeah.
And then she got there, it was so lovely watching her get there. That I don't want to make a drum. I just want the hoop.
Mm,
And then she sort of let go of the word should, the
yes.
word
Yeah.
ought, and she let go of all of those and say, okay, so my initial idea was wrong.
Yeah.
This is a bit. This is a bit I want. I tuned in when my colleague who was helping them make the drums sort of said, "Now, what wood would you like for your hoop?" And she chose willow, and it just went willow,
Mm,
with the whole like you and Oscar thing.
yeah.
And the rest of it was like, oh, plod, 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 plod. Didn't really hear what you said.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
yeah, that is so important. And again, it happens when you're older. You know that you actually want to go to South Africa and climb Kilimanjaro. And you're 56.
Mm,
And you sort of look at this, so how can I do this? Should I get the right sort of tour guide for this? La 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 la, and all your family. You don't really want to go there, dear. And if you
yeah.
don't go, you've got a big hole in your heart forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you do go, and you might be 66 by the time you get there, but you get up to the top of Kilimanjaro and you've done it,
Mm,
and you just go.
yeah.
And we need to. I feel, and I think you and you both do now, too. Is like we need to help people to get this. Yes, I've done it,
Yeah.
and that's important too, because I mean that's being you.
Yeah. And I think what I take from that is also that the importance of your work is that we can't get that yes as long as we're stuck. Now,
No,
and almost being unstuck is almost the first stage. Like we've got to get unstuck first before we can even see what the yes is that we want to try and shoot for, right?
yeah. And well, maybe, but you've got an idea. There's
Yeah.
something in
Yeah.
there. It may not eventually end up looking quite like it started,
Yeah.
but there is a trigger that is ticking in your head, wanting you to do it. And you need to learn to follow that. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says.
Hmm.
You are you. You're not living somebody else's life. They're not living yours. You live your life.
Yeah.
Okay, so you fall off Kilimanjaro. You got there.
Yeah.
What a way to go.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And like so key. If we come back to the drum example, that one of the other social conditionings or narratives might be that I have to do as I'm told, right? Like, and
Yeah,
literally,
yeah,
you're living someone else's life. But actually, no,
yeah,
not at all. Like,
yeah,
if you want to just have the hoop, just have the hoop. But it's so hard to let go of that. Uh, there is a way to do things, and I
it's
must follow that way.
enormous.
Yeah.
And that is always the first thing that we're working on
Mm,
when I'm working with a new client. They often don't realize that's it. And then they start to be able to say, well, yeah, mother always told me to do this, or so and
yes.
so always
Yeah.
told me to do that.
So that's something I'm fascinated by. Is the possibility that, let's say, in the over 50s, that tendency may be more ingrained, more
Yes.
calcified, if you like. Whereas in the younger generation, there hasn't, there's a bit more flexibility potentially. Like I don't know, but it's a hunch I have. And I wonder if you've seen any evidence of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you do see it. I mean, teenagers just want to break every rule in the book and
Yeah,
go for it,
yeah,
guys. You need to break out, be rebellious, be awful. Preferably, I think we ought to sort of chuck them out somewhere and they can all go and do it together, and then
yes,
they don't get
yeah.
under my feet. But
Don't do it.
that's
Don't do it.
silly
Wilderness
enough.
camp and then come back.
Do
Yeah,
it somewhere else. Go
yeah,
away.
yeah,
But yes, and then you decide or find out or realize or whatever that you need to earn a living. and then the boss says you come in at 9 o'clock and you go home at 4 o'clock. Okay, fine. So you fit yourself to that. So then everything else starts fitting around that. And then you're going through this, and then you've got to take the kids to school. You've got to pick the kids up from school. You've got to feed the kids. You've got to make sure they do their homework, la, la, la. You've got to walk the dog. You've got to actually make friends with your partner again, who you haven't seen for the past 10 years while they've been living in the same house, which everybody goes through at times. And so you get into these, and they seem to run around the words ought to and should. And so you do get ingrained with that. Oh, I should be doing that. I shouldn't do that. And letting go of those can be very, very hard. I mean, it's hard for younger people, but it can be even harder for older people. And the thing I see it a lot is, oh, my kids think I'm weird because I'm doing this, greeting the sun every morning in the garden. Why don't you do yoga, Mum? That's acceptable.
Yeah, exactly.
What you're doing is not. And so you're ending up living your children's lives, and because you love them, you may well feel that you should do that. But again, you're not actually doing them any good if you're letting them rule you. You're not doing them any good either.
But and as you say that, there's this. It's almost like at this moment after 50, there is this unique sweet spot moment, almost, where you have an opportunity to let go of the shoulds and oughts of your conditioning, and to not take on the shoulds and oughts of your children, who are then going to,
absolutely, yeah.
So there's it's fascinating to see that there's that almost like that choice point.
And it's also a gift point for the children, because you actually sort of say, no, Mum's going to Kilimanjaro, sort off and look after the kids yourself. Mum's not doing babysitting. No, I'm not there. And the kid, oh, I've got to change.
Yeah.
And that's brilliant for everyone. As soon as somebody makes you change, makes you do something different, pushes you out of your comfort zone a little bit, you think, oh, there is a big world out there.
So we've covered a lot of ground, very, very rich. So thank you so much. What I've really loved is the sense I have is that we've given some distinctions that for someone who isn't totally unfamiliar to the world we've been exploring, will be able to take those distinctions and really work with them. So that feels really good. What I'm curious to know, as we kind of head towards wrapping up, so where we've discussed these 4 functions of your head, your heart, your feelings, your gut, and your intuition, right? There we go, got them.
Well done, George.
we also within Greater Life, we have our kind of 4 pillars where we say that, there's no point building a business if the rest of your life is on fire. So how can we build a business, a greater life, across health, happiness, home, and hustle, which is your business, right? So I guess I'm curious to know, for you right now, in this space where you're still winding up and still living, learning, growing each day, where across those 4 pillars do you feel like you're really strong right now, and where maybe are there still some areas for growth for you?
Because I'm in a very new pond that I'm in business in, and doing business in a different way, I'm poking each bit of the ground with my stick before I tread on it in the hustle bit.
Yeah. Okay.
Health is as well as it can be. I've got multiple conditions. We get on fine most of the time. Happiness, I love it here.
Yeah.
What was the other one?
Home. So your home is actually kind of close relationship.
No. I mean, I couldn't live anywhere else. It's absolutely superb.
Nice.
Absolutely magic. So the first 3 are fine. But I'm walking carefully with the hustle bit. And getting myself into a new.
I'm curious to know, when you're tapping with your stick, what are you afraid you might find? What is it? A mine?
A bloody great hole! I'm going to fall in.
Right. Okay. Yes. Got you.
Imagine Hound of the Baskervilles, Grimpen Mire. You're going across that.
Yep. Gotcha. And and if correct me if I'm wrong, but on the happiness piece, you said I love it here. The sense
Yeah.
I got was you say I love it being incarnated here on Earth. In this moment
Oh
is
yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm
And
sure
I
I
think
shall want to go home at some point,
yeah,
I suppose.
but I think
I
that's
dare,
it.
I dare say my ticket will run out soon, eventually. So, that'll
We'll
be
see.
that.
It's still winding up. But I think that strikes me as something really valuable as well. Is that um, I think it's very hard for things to get totally. I would normally swear, but totally rubbish, right? When we have the perspective of like being grateful for this incarnation,
Yes.
like wow, I get this. Like I don't even know what this is. It could be a giant simulation. It could be a soul school. Who knows? But I'm here, and this is an opportunity to I'm breathing. Wow, the rest is good. We're good. And that's not to make light of challenges that we have, but
No.
to recognize that again, maybe wrapping right around to these conversations we had around failure, that those challenges also offer a portal to something greater, pun intended.
They're always an opportunity. Um, it's the old phrase, is your cup half empty or half full?
Yeah.
And they're always an opening.
Mm.
And yeah, you know, maybe just to tie up slightly on the thing, glad to be in incarnation. Um, the old ways, and I know you know this, it really helps when you realize this isn't the only one you've got.
Mm.
But it takes time.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not expecting everybody to agree with me, and I'm
No.
not in the business of proselytizing.
No.
But it does half help when you realize that, you've got that one behind you and you've got another one in front.
Yeah. And I would own that as well. It's a very I'm a big fan of the work of the late Michael Newton.
Mm.
And just coming across his work was a really, really kind of liberating experience to recognize that, and this is a frame of reference that works for me. Again, not everyone's going to like this, but
Mm.
to recognize that I have chosen to be here, and that
Yes.
there are lessons I'm here to learn. And I know there are
Mm.
some people who think it's all some kind of soul travel. Well, no, that's the frame of reference that doesn't serve me right now.
No, if it doesn't suit you, then
Yeah,
you don't have to live it.
yeah. And so
Um,
that's
I
been
agree with you. Yeah.
and like you say, I'm also curious to know what remembering am I awakening to? So like for me, elements of the ways of the Druids is something that is very dear to me at the moment because of just again things that are placed on my path, and I'm like, oh, what's again intuitively there's something around all of that I feel like I'm remembering rather than learning for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So to bring us to a close, any calls to action that you would offer? We have explored that if folks are stuck, you are a very good person to walk by their side as they
Mm.
discover what unstuck is for them. What is the best way for people to connect with you, contact you? Any books of yours that you would recommend they start with, for example, as well?
Well, yeah, probably the easiest way for anybody to get in touch with me is to type Elen Sentier, as per the little thingy up on the top here,
Okay.
into Google. And you will get my LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I'm not very good at Instagram yet, but I'm getting
Yeah,
better.
know me.
You will find my books. I've written lots. Go to Amazon, type Elen Sentier. You will need 2/3 of my name to get me come up.
Yeah.
Because there are quite a lot of Ellens around.
Yeah.
And with the books, just whichever one pings off the page at you,
Yes. Yeah.
because they will hit different people at different times. So, if one of them pings off the page, grab it. They're all on Kindle, so you can get it that way.
Perfect. Yeah, I've got 4 or 5 on my Kindle. Yeah.
You've got no excuses then, George.
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic. Well, Ellen, listen, it's been a really wonderful conversation, a fitting first episode of Greater Life Stories. And here is to more winding up and to continue to tell a greater life story going forward. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Brilliant.
George.
Take care.